And this is a Tuesday evening with the Trampled Underfoot podcast. Your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo, coming to you from two different opposite sides of the country. And we're here to discuss whatever comes to mind, life, the universe, and everything. What's going on, Mark?
That's right. Oh man, just all kinds of stuff. You name it, it's going on. Now, uh, interest of full disclosure here, Eloy and I, we're in the green room backstage before he pushes the button to go live. We were talking about various and sundry things. You've had a short stretch of bad luck here with various little things that happened all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it made me think of something, and that is they say that bad things happen in threes, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Now, I don't know if you subscribe to that theory or
Yeah, I
not.
counted the three already.
Yeah. Well, here's my question. Does it really happen in threes? Or is it that we just start counting again once we get to three?
I don't have the answer to that. I think that we start counting, or I think that we find patterns.
Yeah. Because like three celebrities will die within a month. And then the next month, three more celebrities will die. Well, depending upon your point of view, that's six celebrities. Oh, no, that's two groups of three. They always die in threes. Well, no, they didn't really. It's just you stopped counting at three and started over again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I
we
just
have to make sense. We have to make sense of the world. This
yeah.
actually, for some reason, we always this actually connects with what we talked about last week and the week. We have to try to make sense of the world, so people end up with those kind of things to make a nice, even if they don't, even if they're not doing it consciously,
Yeah.
or just society. We have to make sense of the world, so we have to put categories in order for things to sort of, so that we can push dolly cart things around the warehouse of our mind.
I think you're right in that we look for patterns, and if we don't find one, we'll create one in an attempt to make sense of the world. Greg Snow Crusher says depends on when you start counting, and that's true. That's true as well. Your refrigerator goes out. So you go get a new refrigerator. Then the window unit goes out. So you go get a new window unit. Then the washing machine goes out. You think, okay, that's three things.
Yeah, we're good
But
now.
but the next week your dryer goes out. You start counting again. All right, that's one. What's going to be next? It's like, no, that was four things. You just stopped counting at three and started again so that you can, oh no, here we go.
Well, I guess we'll use this. I did have a thing to share
Okay.
with all of you, but before that, but let's go with this for half a second to expand on what we were saying. I'll try to make it as compact as possible. So I was telling Mark in the green room, and actually earlier, because we did have some issues that we had to attend to concerning the weather, and so I reached out to Mark today earlier, and just in case things went awry, but everything seems to. Well, let me not jinx it,
Yeah.
because things do come in threes as we've discussed. So um, I have neglected maintenance of a lot of things in and in its place for the past few years. I have been very much in depth into educating myself on the history of my ancestors, to include documentation and also history in general of that, which has led me on different, what would you call it, uh, goose chase. There's a
Yeah,
word for that.
wild goose chases and a lot of different journeys to a lot of places you never expected.
Right. So I've gone in different directions, and so it's been a thing. But I've focused on that at the neglect of, I guess you'd call it, menial, keeping up to date chores and such. I live in Miami. I live in Florida, and all it takes is rain and sun, and the plant life here is extreme. So, for within the past year and a half to 2 years, I have had shrubbery and trees and vines. Literally, if you've ever seen the not Machu Picchu. Well, it could be Machu Picchu, but have you seen those pyramids across America that they show pictures of them in the 1800s and they just look like mountains, but then they start excavating, all of a sudden it's an actual image of an actual structure. Well, um, it's gotten not that bad, but yes, that bad. I've been going up. I've been going up and trimming and working it, so I've been removing all the crap. Um, and by doing so, because it was coming over my roof and all that, so I could have had a Machu Picchu situation going on. I was on my way. I still have to finish a lot, but I've removed a significant portion just by neglecting it. Um, and I found other problems on the roof due to them being so I had to take care of that and so on. Then I got down and this was yesterday, but then today um, I kept on with that, and then I walked into the bedroom and realized that there was leaking from the AC. Well, not really. There was water on the floor further away from the room, and I was like, "What is this water?" It took me some time, and I figured it was the AC. I saw it, so it was filtering down the wall, underneath the floorboard, and across to the other side where it would pop up. I was like, "Holy smokes! Now I have this issue," and so I had to take care of that. So I'm working on that, right? And then I turn around, I step out of my bedroom, and I go into the kitchen to get some towels and all this and that, and my dog's sitting there crouched down taking a massive dump right in the center of my kitchen, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, is this necessary right now? So Mark and I were that's why Mark and I were talking about a series of threes and whatnot. So everything was like conspiring to make yeah.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, man. And I commiserate with you because it's like, is there anything else? Come on, universe. Is there anything else you want to throw at me right now? You know,
I mean, I'm
but
clutching.
I'm not one to slap fate in the face, but there comes a point where you just, your whole attitude is really, really
Well, that's
now.
what I told him. That's what I told him. I looked at him and he's sitting there looking at me, and he did get the shame look.
Yeah. Well, he
But
knows he's wrong.
But I'm looking at him, I'm like, dude, have you not seen? Because all the stuff that we're dealing with, and you have to go and do this, and it's like, so that's why we were on the things going in threes and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? It's it's just a matter of wow.
I will tell you this one other thing, Mark, which I didn't share with you, but we've talked about it in the past, and I'm fairly transparent on it with you and in general, but not really in the. But I'm very out of shape. But to a significant degree for me. I know that there may be other people that are further out of shape, or there's different people, but for me, I'm incredibly out of shape. So all these, I guess, what you would call upkeep that I've neglected, that I've been working on in these past few days, has made me any position that I moved to, like up on the roof. Not only was I standing and reaching over with the saw, but I would also bend over in a certain way, inclined, and all these movements and whatnot. And then down here and with the grass and this, and I've felt that I've had an exercise.
Let me help you out before you have the problem, because I go through this myself. Now, you know me. I'm not a health food guy. I'm not a supplements guy. I'm not one of these people. Oh, you need to get on turmeric or oat bran. That'll save your life. I'm not a kale smoothie kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, it works. Magnesium. Just magnesium supplement. I take a they're caplets, capsule shaped pills. Every morning, it's magnesium, zinc, and calcium. If I don't, I will get muscle cramps like you would not believe when I exert myself that way. So I'm grab you a bottle. You can get them at Wally World. They're like $6-7. 2 capsules in the caplets in the morning, and I'm telling you, you will avoid the muscle cramps that will come if you keep that up.
We're not wait, let me see if this thing, we're not physicians, so always consult your local whatnot, But well, it is it is also true that certain people are more deficient in certain uh I guess you'd call
Vitamins and minerals and what have you.
minerals,
Yeah.
and other people um are different. So there are
Right.
some people have higher like
Well,
calcium retention, and
right.
so there's a lot of different. So some stuff, some things may um be beneficial for some and not for others. Although we need all the same,
Well,
minerals.
also, I will say I'm over 60 years old, but one of my wife's bandmates is a pharmacist, and she just mentioned in passing the muscle cramps and leg cramps and what have you. And immediately he said, "Do you take a magnesium supplement?" She said, "No." He said, "Okay, do you take a calcium supplement?" She does, to avoid osteoporosis. We're both older. He says, "All right, get you a zinc, magnesium, calcium supplement and take that instead." He says, "And I'll bet you your cramps go away. It's not a guarantee, but I'll bet you they go away." And they went away for her. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to start taking these." And brother, I'm here to tell you it works. The human body is a pretty complex yet simple organism. Simple, but not easy. Um, in that it will absorb the nutrients it needs and expel everything it doesn't need.
Yeah.
So, if you are low in magnesium, you will start getting cramps, and it does get worse with age. That does, yeah. I mean, I'm not kidding you. Sitting down in a chair, I would turn a certain way and suddenly get a muscle cramp under my rib cage.
Mhm.
And we're like, "Oh, holy cow!" Or wake up in the middle of the night, just shrieking from leg cramps.
Mhm.
Go from a dead sleep to standing up next to the bed, going, "Ugh,"
Do you remember when we were kids that because this is one thing that I've noticed you probably it's directly to what you're saying, but we used to, without thinking about it or considering it in terms of exercise, we used to, alone or with a friends, drop on the carpet in the middle of the living room, sit crouch down, automatically stand up, run
Yeah.
over here, run over there. I mean, there was so many twisting and turning motions and this and that, and we didn't think anything of it. These contortions were normal. But as we age, or at least in my case, I think this is true generally speaking to one degree or another for everybody because it is a process. But as we age, we're not doing those. I mean, when was the last time you just laid on the rug and looked at TV and then flipped on over like the stuff we used to do? We don't necessarily contort in those. So after a while, our body forgets or is not as flexible.
And also, as a part of aging, your muscles do stiffen up. Your joints stiffen up and your muscles become tighter. And if you're not used to certain motions, you know, just for instance, go out and rake the yard. If you're not used to it,
That'll kick your butt.
you're going to have sore arms, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
If you're not used to walking up and down stairs and you suddenly go have to do a bunch of going up and down stairs, you're going to have some leg issues because you're not used to that movement. Well, that gets worse as you age. And I wouldn't get cramps at the time I was doing the work. It was always later on when trying to relax. All of a sudden, it would just, the back of the calf would tighten up and
Yeah.
just,
It stays
stiffen the
there.
leg, all of it. Yeah. And once I started taking the magnesium, I mean, I used to get cramps daily. I had a muscle cramp last week that woke me up. But I mean, it's nothing like it used to be. So I'm a firm believer in that because it worked for me and it worked for my wife. So I figure, yeah, if you're having muscle issues, magnesium.
Always consult your
Yes,
physician
but always consult your physician because
just in case.
everybody has different needs and different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, that's true. Getting old sucks. The alternative is not so great either. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jim. So, what can I say?
Yeah. I mean, um, before getting to the bit that I wanted to share, but I do want to mention that in terms, I saw a video where they were talking about the cell,
Uh-huh.
and and they were going into all the functions of the cell and this and that of what they do know, because they still don't know. It's like a little mini universe in a cell, and they
Mhm.
have little tubes and little machines that are like gears
Mhm.
inside a cell, and those little gears pass proteins, and they're like little, it's like a universe of, and then like if one part needs some sort of mineral or some sort of, it will it will create a tube
Mhm.
to go to that place, send the needed resource, and then it'll reroute to the next thing and
Mhm.
other, and it's a universe of things that are happening, that are, that look an awful lot like like an like a city working
Mhm.
in conjunction, and it was amazing to watch that, and it was amazing. It was amazing, and then they're trying
Yeah.
to 3D it so that you can put on virtual goggles, and they've done so you can like move it around and look at, and they're trying to learn more. They've always been, but I just found it fascinating how complicated, it's not just a little thing, and then there's
Right.
just like, oh, it needs this. It's not. It's a universe, or
Yeah.
yeah, a universe inside that tiny little,
Mhm.
and I would imagine something's got to be beyond that sort of
Well,
microscopic stuff.
and
It's
that's
more
on the
intricate.
mic and that's on the micro level, and the trillions of cells that we have in our body, it like you just described, it absorbs what it needs and then stops.
Yeah,
And that's the way the body is. I mean, vitamin C, your body will absorb what it needs and the rest you flush. And so, that's one of the cool things about the human anatomy, is that it does that. It's self-regulating. And if you eat a mineral rich diet, which admittedly we don't really, then maybe you don't need any of those supplements.
it
But
depends, right, on the person.
yeah, it is, because every metabolism is different. And but if you are deficient in certain vitamins or minerals, a supplement may be for you, or maybe just improve your diet to where you don't need to do that. But like I said, I am not a supplement guy. I'm not a health food kind of guy. I don't do the kale smoothies or anything like that.
No.
But if something works for me, then I'll continue to use it,
Hmm.
you know. So uh, I don't just automatically poo poo something because I don't like choose to partake, Now, I think
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. If it works, it works, you know.
Well,
So,
have you heard of this? This isn't to do with what I wanted to share, but have you, since we're talking about this, have you heard of this? I never heard of it until like 2 days ago, and I was completely amazed. They can now, and have been, it's going to market in a year or two, they
mhm.
say, they can now laboratory grow meat.
Yes, I've heard it.
And I saw a few videos on the process. It looks disgusting.
Yeah.
They can only make what you would call ground beef,
Mhm.
and what it takes is like, there's three chemicals, and one of them is the bile. There's a word for it, um, or the liquid bile, where the calf is growing, that they extract that
Mhm.
juice in
Mhm.
order to use it as a medium so that cells can reproduce in it.
Yeah.
And there's a whole industry for that bile
Yeah.
that's super expensive, like a thing, a flask like that is like 200 and something dollars. But there's a whole industry, and I saw the meat, and it's, oh, you can make little smushed up steaks that look like steaks, or like little thin sheets of like skirt steaks, ground beef, and this and that, and it's like, there's something, there's something that I can't quite. Maybe it's, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I mean, I could. it doesn't seem natural.
Oh, it's not. It's. I mean, it is when you if you break it down into its elements, it is natural, but it is synthetic in that it is man-made. It is engineered. I have heard of this. They've been working on it for the first I heard about it was like 2016, and they had successfully done it with chicken. But at the time, um, it was estimated the amount that they had made, they kind of extrapolated out. They figured it would be somewhere along the lines of a little over $10,000 per pound. So it was nothing that was commercially feasible, but it was something. Basically, they did it to prove that they could do it. And I guess, well, that was 6 years ago. So I didn't know that they were thinking about bringing it out on the market. Personally, I don't see it as being a big seller. Sure, there are going to be some people who will try it just to try it to say they did it.
Yeah.
But sometimes just because you can do something doesn't mean that it's going to be the right thing to do. Simply because it's going to have to be economically viable. I mean, do you remember the big thing a few years ago? This was in the late 90s. It was called Olestra. It was
I remember that.
it was a synthetic oil used for frying
Mhm.
that was not a vegetable oil. It was all 100% man-made. But the side effect was, how can I put this? Well, I'll just put it the way they did: explosive diarrhea. So it lasted about 6 months and was gone off the market because, okay, you proved you can do it and you proved that it's, just as cheap as canola oil or something like that. But is it really something that you want to do?
But you're not shitting me on that one, are you?
But
I'm sorry. It was a cheap. It was so cheap.
yes,
Because
yes.
really there was no. But I just.
Mm. Greg here, um, Soylent Green. We may be heading in that direction. Did you ever see that movie,
I
Soylent
did.
Green?
I did not.
You did not?
No, I
Oh
only
well,
watch vampire and horror movies. Greg,
well, this was a futuristic dystopian society movie. Charlton Heston, Edward G. Robinson,
Mhm.
uh, done in the geez, that was late 70s or early 80s, wasn't it, Greg? I would recommend it if you can find it. It's called Soylent Green. It's a futuristic dystopian society thing. I think you'd get a kick out of it.
All right.
Then you'll get that reference, but I don't want to spoil it to you. Spoil it for you. So, yeah, Jim Dockrell, like those gummy bears with artificial sweetener, same result. Yes, if you have that issue, forget about buying laxatives. You just have you some sugar-free candies, and you'll be singing. I'm here to tell you. It's not predictable, but it's effective.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have a cleanse, but every now and then,
Oh yeah, 2, 3 sugar-free peppermints, and you will not have an issue. I'm here to tell you what.
that for some reason it hasn't happened since, but for a time, anytime I eat Checkers, the hamburger or the cheeseburger,
Mhm.
within a short spell, I
It's
was
the fat.
bathroom bound.
I'm willing to bet you it was the fat. Certain fast food places have that effect on me as well, and have for about 20 years. So that's why I don't go there. But it's simply the fat content of their meat. When you're sitting there with a hamburger in your hand and you got grease running down your arm, I mean, there's an issue. That's just like, wait a minute, guys, this is too much fat. We got to get rid of some of this. So I just don't go to those places anymore. So
All right, so I guess I'll share what I wanted to share. This is going in a different direction, but
a more wholesome direction.
well, not really. Maybe well, to be determined. So, I don't know if you guys know this or not. I don't know if Mark knows this, because it's not you're not necessarily researching the things that I am, but it's been a but you might know it because it's been around. The information has been around for some time. So, um, did you know that Hitler? Oh, well, let me backtrack. Um, that's a tough one to backtrack from, right?
Yeah.
To start with that one like
Yeah.
that, and then say,
Boo!
"Oh wait."
Just kidding.
Um, so there's this thing within the world of um, genetic studies, and I am a layman, right? I make no. Whenever I talk of these things, I talk of it as a person that's a hobbyist that's exploring their thing. I'm not talking about these things from an expert level. That doesn't even need to be said, but I'm saying it so that so I'm admitted publicly so that people understand that I'm not saying this from a place of hey, I've got all this. No, I'm not doing that. I'm just
Education.
saying,
Yeah.
hey, these are the things that. Well, anyways, so um, there's a thing within DNA called haplogroups,
Right.
and haplogroups are unlike um, the tests that you see online that you can take to find out if you have English ancestry or French ancestry or this or that. And then they'll give you a little sliding scale of percentages that are estimates that say, well, your DNA mostly looks like people from this part of the world, or your DNA looks like, and then it's on a sliding scale with different places. And the reason they do estimates is that um, the DNA that we have is that we all share as humans is so similar that it's not self-evident unless you dive in and look at the coding and look for stretches of DNA where you can see, oh, these people mixed together so that this chunk of letters
Mhm.
coincide with people, roughly speaking, because it's also, even at that level, it's like to one degree and another degree, so it's estimates. Oh, these people match with what we find in Scandinavia, and then this stretch here, and then so there's all this, um, but it's also similar that it's very difficult, and that's why they make it estimates and whatnot. Well, but there's a thing called the haplogroups, which what it is that it's a portion of your DNA that was handed to you from your mom and dad. The Y was handed to you from your dad unchanged because it got corrupt. What happened was that parts of your DNA have been damaged, so there's no transformation, um, so that it's handed down generation after generation undisturbed. And with those haplogroups, you can trace your ancestry all the way back. They suggest hundreds of thousands of years is what they suggest. So you can go. So no one, um, you have the same ancestry paternally
Mhm.
through that Y
Mhm.
as your great 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 great
You
great
just keep going. Yeah.
ancestor on your father's side. So your father's father. Likewise on your mom's side. So they can pinpoint that and say, oh, in my case, Eloy is R1B. I'm R1B L2. And R1B L2 takes you back. Actually, it takes you back somewhere in Eastern Europe, where it branched off. It could have been Anatolia, Eastern Europe, whatever. But everybody alive, that's of European extraction, um, are similar with each other. But on the paternal, because they mix with each other, right? People mix and mix and mix and mix and mix and mix
Right.
years and years and years and years and years and years and but your paternal's a string that you can follow.
Right.
Anyways, so mine is R1b. R1b happens to be the most common Western European haplogroup. So my father's father um, came from a branch of people that broke off and were the fathers of your main haplogroups in Western Europe. But there's other haplogroups. Hitler, guess what his haplogroup is? Without looking.
R1B.
Nope.
Okay.
Hitler's haplogroup is E1b or E2b. I'd have to, but it's an E. And E originates in Africa.
Okay.
His father's was of African origin. Now, mind you, that happened. So there's a contradiction I'm getting to that's very obvious.
Okay.
But here's the bit, and the way they discovered it, because they couldn't extract Hitler's DNA, but they took his ancestors' DNA, his paternal lineage, and their E1b.
Mm-hmm.
So they are, and E1b also happens to be one of the main haplogroups, paternal lineages of Ashkenazi Jews.
Okay.
However, and it's an African.
Mm-hmm.
So like people in present day Morocco, Algeria, and so on, it's common in the north of Africa.
Okay.
It's a Berber haplogroup, Berber
Okay.
tribe haplogroup. It's a
Okay.
Semitic peoples and so on and so forth. But it's not solely that.
Mm-hmm.
There, Semitic people can have other paternal Y origins. It's just that's
Yeah.
Anyways, and there's Europeans that have that E1b because there's migration throughout the long history. Well, anyways, here's the thing: Hitler, according to the family members, and remember, if you have a brother, all your brother's sons will have your same haplogroup, and your brother will have your same haplogroup because it came from your father, and your father's brothers, and your father's father's brothers, and so on.
Right.
So all those now, with that said, it was a big to-do when it was discovered, when they did the research, because it came out in the press that Hitler's origins were Jewish, which is a huge contract. But they overstepped it in that scenario, in that although Jews, a lot of them have that haplogroup, it's not the only haplogroup, and that haplogroup is so old that it also belongs to other tribes and other peoples in North Africa and so on, and in Europe.
Right.
Because they spread through. So long story short, Hitler has an African paternal origin, which is ironic as hell, right? Now, he was European,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because he has mixture of many people. That's just your why. But the fact of him having that,
Mm-hmm.
and the atrocities committed is so ironic. And not to mention, I thought of when I read into that, I thought of all these KKK people that are like, how Hitler, and like they're looking for this purity, and we got to maintain it, when their icon, because a lot of them love Hitler, and their icon, not all of them, but a lot of them like
Mm-hmm.
get all wet over Hitler, they get all hard on Hitler. They're living a bull crap. It's like a fantasy of what they would think that the world is, but it's not, scientifically speaking.
Right.
The irony of all of it was just so incredible. I thought, holy crap.
Well,
I wanted to share it with
there's such a thing as poetic justice, but you also have to remember that you're talking about a mentally unstable megalomaniac who found a scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
His was, I don't know, Yeah, there is poetic justice in the world.
Yeah.
Um, Greg said something here. DNA haplogroups is just the new horoscope predictions. No, it's kind of sort of like blood types. They're individual. My haplogroup is I2A,
Yeah, no,
and
it's not a
that is
religion. It's not.
it's no, it's nothing like that at all. It's just science. If you're O positive blood type, you're O positive blood type. If you're haplogroup R1B, you're R1B. If you're I2A, you're I2A. It's just
Yeah, yeah,
that's where your lineage came from.
yeah. It's not.
So
It's not. So you know, there's there's enough literature out there for a. I'm not calling you that. I'm calling from my perspective. There's enough literature out there for a novice,
mhm,
with relative amounts of relative amount of ability to process information to get a gist of the
mhm.
lay of the land
And how it
now
works and all that. Yeah.
and how it works. Now, it's not magic or voodoo or tarot cards or anything to that effect. I mean, that's the furthest from the truth. In fact, it's so extremely not that. Um, it's just there's plenty of info. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it would
Well,
blow a person's mind.
it's
Um,
you on a cellular level, and it is so serious. It is used in criminal cases. I mean, DNA evidence is DNA evidence,
no,
and
but
that's
not
all
only
there is
that,
to it.
not only that, you, so your cousins.
Uh-huh.
If you take a DNA test as an example, and your cousin that lives, I don't know, in let's say anywhere around the world, um, they take the test. Um, they show up on your list due to the segments of
Right.
the. They count that through the. They have machines that sequence and they say, oh, this person a stretch of 124 SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphisms of letters.
Hmm.
They say, oh, Eloy and so from wherever have this stretch,
Hmm.
but that stretch is not shared with other people. The people
Right.
that are a small group that can be. Long story short, there's no way around it.
Hmm.
It's combinations
Right.
that they juxtapose with each other, and it never happens that you juxtapose with someone that doesn't belong to your. The further out you go,
Yeah.
you match with everyone.
Right.
The
Yeah. It
further
just depends on how it just depends on how far back you want to dig and how deep you want to dig.
the further back you go,
Hmm.
as an example, I connect, as a matter of fact, with Jamie Page.
Hmm.
Literally, I connect with Jamie Page.
Hmm.
So what that means is that at some point in the very distant past, who knows when,
Hmm. You had a
Jamie
common
Page has
ancestor.
we have a common ancestor.
Right.
It is what it is. All human beings are, but that's not the point. The point of this whole thing is that within the world of that is that Hitler with all that, and then the people that are followers to this day with all that have these notions that are more to do with
Yep.
the hoarding
And,
of goods and you know or preserving some sort of ethnic thing. um their 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 main
well,
man was of a lineage that originated in Africa. Although he was European, let's be fair, because
well,
you have many ancestors.
he was born in Europe, so technically, yes, he was a European, and his father was born in Europe as well, and his father was born in Europe as well.
Let
It
me
just
add
depends
this.
on how far back you want to go, but that's what I mean by poetic
Wait,
justice. In that,
let me interject this one bit. This is important. What you just said, everything. But each of those fathers that were born in Europe married women,
right,
and those women, no, this is important, a key for everyone. And those women had parents as well. So you not only belong to that father, but you belong to all those other branches that culminate in
right,
you. So Hitler was European.
right.
So, but the nuance of this is still hilarious.
But that's what I mean by poetic justice, because you
Yeah.
have an impure people chasing purity,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
impossible.
Well,
There
according to the thing,
is
yeah.
there is really no true racial purity, is what I'm getting at.
No, no,
It's a
there,
fantasy.
no, it's according to the DNA. It's one of the main takeaways that there is no such thing.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
an impossibility.
no, it's just a sliding scale of
Hmm.
combinations of ancestors
Right,
from one person to the other. But
right.
so I found it poetically,
Yeah,
like you said, a poetic justice, in that it's useless if you look at it. But so whatever. That's what I wanted to share.
so
Greg's still on it.
we think I think Greg is yanking your leg for you referring him to Vampire Vixens from Moonbase Alpha as a good movie to watch. I think he's getting back at
Well,
you.
no, he's saying something specific. Some people just need to justify their being in the timeline of humanity. Yeah,
I
some people do need to justify being in the timeline of humanity, and other people need to justify other things. I mean, it's
I
an
think
option.
he's I think
Why
he's
not?
yanking I think he's yanking your leg. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I'm sure he is. But the statement is still valid,
Mhm.
as a valid thing. Yes, there's people that are on about
Well,
whatever it is they're on about.
well, think about it. I mean, what do we do with burials? We have a gravestone, or we have a plaque, or we have a monument, or something like that, and that is us leaving our mark on the timeline of humanity.
Look, another
You
thing
know,
I'll say. So because it is an interesting thing. Um, I'm doing this particular research because I like it.
uh huh,
Um, I mean, generally speaking, I like it, and I do like it in terms of the fact that it's to do with my ancestors. I like that because I don't have them around anymore, my
hmm,
parents and so on. So there's many reasons that
right.
I enjoy this thing, but it's also um, educating myself to certain histories that there's value in it. But whatever I have in my mind of what it's about,
Hmm,
that I do this and share it, whatever I have in my mind that it's about,
hmm.
um, you might, or someone out there might not reach the same conclusion, assuming of what I think that I'm doing.
Hmm.
Some people might look at, like, I get the comments. Some people, when they see my results, and it's like, oh well, you know, they've said, oh well, you may be European, but you're of the dark Europeans. Or they'll say, oh well, he doesn't look like this, or he doesn't look like that. As an example, there's people that are on, and I get the questions, which I enjoy because it shows the psychology of people out there, and you can see the lay of the land. The boisterous few, but still, you can see people's way of thinking. And there's lots of material there that I can extract for it for the purposes
Hmm.
of what I'm doing. And there's some people that consider what you're doing, whatever it is that you do, as useless. And human beings will attribute whatever human beings attribute to others according to their view of the world. And I'm gonna, but I have to do what I do that I'm interested in,
Hmm.
regardless of what external perceptions could or could not be.
Right.
I'm gonna go ahead and do the things, and but people will, anything you say, people will take the information and according to their understanding will attribute to you whatever thing that they want to attribute to you.
Yeah,
It just
or project their own insecurities onto you, or what have you. Personally, for in my case, I can only
yeah.
speak for myself. I'm a history buff as it is, and especially when it comes to American history, because that's where I am. If I was in the UK, I'd be interested in British history or Welsh history or whatever. But because I'm here, I'm interested in US history. So my genealogical research has been along the lines of researching history on a personal level. You know, it's one thing to study the movement of the Great Migration from Jefferson, Missouri to the Willamette Valley in Oregon along the Oregon Trail. A lot of people have researched that. I have a personal connection to it. So, yeah, I'm going to dig deeper into it. You know, the Revolutionary War, I have an ancestor that fought in it. So, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more interested in the battles that he took part in than I am in the battles he didn't take part in. So, it's researching the same history I was already interested in and looking into, but on a more personal level. That's all it is for me, really.
Yeah,
You know.
the thing is that my thing was to study the area
Hmm.
that my ancestors but came from. But the problem, or the what appeared, was that there were little, I guess you'd say, little branches that sprouted out, and so
Hmm.
it ended up me traveling to in my study to Louisiana in the 1700s, and discovering things that. Um, I'm not from Louisiana, so I don't know local Louisiana history, even though Louisiana is in the United States. But
Right.
as I learn that, then you start you learn about the the Louisiana Purchase, and what happened prior to it, and what happened during the Revolutionary War, and who were the people that fought there.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be people that that I come from, although I can't place them right now. But I have
Yeah.
many cousins in Louisiana that
Hmm.
are honest to goodness Louisiana people for hundreds of years, and yet we share
There's a
significant
there's
segments
a
of
family
DNA.
connection there. Yeah.
So there's a family connection there. Do I know the family connection? Well, I kind of think, as far as what we see, is that it all traces back to the Canary Islands as an example. But I don't know who exactly, so I'm study how to. So it it's an endless thing, and it's whatever you're interested in doing. Some people won't find value in it.
Now, let me ask you this about that because you open up. Oh, yeah, Greg, please get on it and do me a personal favor. I would like to know. Please start with blue raspberry because that's my favorite. I'm all for research into sleepy DNA because if we can clone it, there we go. So, but let me ask you this about that. Have you reached out to any of those people you have a connection with?
I have.
And what do they know about their family history or their story? Or have you been able to compare and contrast your
Yeah,
research?
well, I have multiple lines
Hmm.
that trace to Louisiana, and
Right.
I'm also part of the Louisiana set. I'm part of the Canary Islands. I'm paraphrasing it. Canary Islands, Louisiana French settlers community group.
Hmm.
I'm
Okay.
also part of the Central Italy, and I don't know what, blah blah blah, group. So what Ancestry does is that they when they see your stretches of letters in your DNA, and
Hmm.
if your letters connect with people from Italy,
Hmm.
from a particular region of Italy, that denotes that you have either currently, they state it, either you have currently today people that live there that are your ancestors, or in the past, um, 100 years or whatnot. And so we connect you to this group because you share that those DNA sequences with all these people. It,
Right.
now those and so whatever. So the long story short of it is that I've reached out, and there's multiple um, branches going back into the 1700s
Hmm.
and whatnot, but I can't make the
The
connection yet.
connection. Yeah. Well, I was just wondering if maybe they had information that would help you making that connection because the more people working on it, obviously, the better. Jamie says apparently your family had a fight with his a few years ago. Well, I mean, I guess that's possible.
No, well,
You know.
I have people that are English, on my ancestry
Mhm.
list of cousins that
Yeah.
are honest to goodness English people,
Mhm.
um, and Irish people too.
Well,
Um, so it's like,
and now you know what I mean when I say we're all basically mutts and imported goods, because there have been so many combinations and mixtures over the centuries and over the eons. It's just wow, you know.
well, so um, I have a situation where um, since so I'm American, I was born in the U.S. Let's say, or not. Let's say it is what it is. I was born in the U.S. But prior to me, my parents were born in Cuba,
Mhm.
so that's another place. So,
Right.
but from Cuba to here, that's just one
Yeah.
extension. So my folks were my parents were Cuban, but their parents then in this situation weren't from Cuba. Their parents were European.
Mhm.
So it's more nuanced than that. But my grandfather went from Spain to Cuba.
Mhm.
So, he took whatever DNA, let's in the context of this, was in that place
Mhm.
and brought it to Cuba.
Mhm.
My grandmother happened to be a scenario where her father was the son of an Italian immigrant,
Mhm.
but her mother was a long-standing, according to my dad, I haven't been able that I don't know, but her mother was a long-standing family of Cubans. What does
Mhm.
that mean in terms of long-standing? To me, according to what my dad said when he was alive and shared the information, was that they'd been there generationally. But I don't know how long. I don't know.
Mhm.
So there's that. Then my grandfather is the son of people from Spain. On my
Mhm.
mother's side, his mom and dad
Mhm.
were from Malaga or Andalusia
Mhm.
on both sides, generationally into the distant past. And then my grandmother, the one that has just recently passed away, both her parents were immigrants, likewise, to Cuba, and they were from the Canary Islands.
Mhm.
So my Cuban um, generational thing, according to my dad, does occur in one line. But the point is this: I come from all these people from different parts of Spain and Italy and Canary Islands that I see ancestors from all over the place. It might be different from another person that has a different combination of people that
Sure.
made up who they are. But I have all these people from all these different places. So due to that, when I see something like a British connection, I ask myself, well, how does this happen? Or a British
Yeah.
result?
Yeah.
And my DNA say, oh, well, you're British to this extent. Well, why? How is that? I'm just Spanish, man. And well, it's because it's my people were literally from different parts of Spain, and who knows where their people were from, and who knows where their people were from.
Exactly.
So yeah, so it's
Yeah.
complicated.
And that's where we go with that. How far back do you dig? I mean, you cannot argue the fact that that DNA is there. I mean, because it is. It's up to us to try to make the connection if we want to or have the way to dig that far back, you know.
I have
So
connections with people that write in Hebrew,
yeah.
like I in Hebrew, and it's like,
Hmm.
well, I can't make heads or tail of that.
Yeah. Well, why should you? You know, you don't speak or write Japanese either, so you know why should you?
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
one never knows where the trail leads, and that's another aspect of it is trying to figure out where those connections are, because I'm in one of those weird situations where I can trace back to my 7 times great grandfather in America. And then you go further back, and we're talking about it in the 1100s. the Y DNA, I am a direct descendant of a guy who was a muckety muck in Belgium and then came over to Lincolnshire in England and was a muckety muck there, and then split for Scotland after the Battle of Lincoln. So I have that documented. We're talking back in 10 and 1100, but then there's this big gap to the 1600s. So there's 600 years of history there. So how many generations is that? Let's say it's 10 generations, 12 generations, you know, of a big gap. And I can't make those connections. How do we get from Belgium to England to Scotland to suddenly appearing in Maryland? Well, I've got the Belgium, England, Scotland. I've got that figured out. Now I got to connect Scotland to Maryland. And that's where I'm hosed, because there were a lot of wars going on at the time. There was religious turmoil going on at the time. There is an entire sector of people in Great Britain whose religious persuasion was so persecuted, there are no records. None. No record was kept for several generations. So, for all I know, I'm part of that. I don't know that to be the
Well,
case,
you would be part of
but
many things.
yeah, I mean,
You would
so
be part. You would be part of a vast part of history that conspired to reach you and you become who you are. I mean, you could span, in theory, not
but
indeed. We don't know indeed. You span the history of wherever your ancestors were from.
well, but I'm talking about the documentation trail. I can't make the paper trail. I can make it to a certain point and stop, and then I can pick it up 600 years later and bring it all the way to me today. That's as far as I can go, but I've got a 600-year gap in there. And it could be anything as simple as simple as they haven't scanned those books yet, or that information isn't been made available yet, or they haven't discovered those books yet. I mean, when you think about 1,000 years of history or more in the UK, that's a lot of documentation. I mean, think about what documentation we have in the US, and our country's only 230 something years old, 240 something years old. Imagine, multiply that by 4 or 5, and you've got the UK. It's going to take a week or two to get all that stuff digitized. So I can completely understand that, but that doesn't help my case right now. So it's probably, I may have hit the brick wall that I can't get through, and maybe an ancestor will be able to. But I'm kind of stuck right now until more information is forthcoming. And I'm not the only one, because this entire line that suddenly appears in Maryland in 1706, I believe it is, that entire line, we're all equally in the dark. And we do email back and forth, but we're all in the same boat. We're stuck with that individual.
Yeah, the that early, I I've studied very little, but some that early history in America, like the documents,
Mhm.
like they're publicly available. You could look through. I mean, but you need the context of, of a lot of things, and I haven't done a deep dive in terms of that, but I did do a bit of a study to look for Spanish people in early America,
Mhm.
where it would not, where it's not apparent that that was the case.
Mhm.
The idea of um, landowning people from outside of your typical Northwestern and primarily English,
Mhm.
at the very extreme Dutch and such and this and that.
Mhm.
But what I found is that in early America, prior to the Revolutionary War, documented that you could look for right now, there were a lot of people of Southern European
Oh yeah.
origin in that, yeah, but that's no, but see, no, it's, but see, that's the problem. Unless I would have sat and looked through it, I wouldn't have. Last thing that could ever, because the going idea is that you have, people from
Well,
England, and then
well,
there's this going on, but none
yeah,
of the nuances that one would think. And you ask any American, I would wager they would have no. In fact, they'll probably say, "Oh, come on," because it's not something, and yet it's part of the history that
well,
in the colonies you had people buying land and selling land,
mhm.
acquiring acreages and selling it to this group and that on in their documentation. But it's not something that people know. It's
No,
simply, oh, the English came and blah blah blah.
well, because that's the story that's told. We're also told, because I was aware and I was taught in school, that yes, the Spanish did settle the South. It was the Spanish who did explore and discover the South, whereas the Redcoats were more up towards the north. I mean, St. Augustine, Florida is the oldest permanent city.
Yeah, but no, but I'm talking about New York. You've seen
So
my video. Have you seen the videos
yes,
that I put?
I've seen your video, but what I'm
Massachusetts.
yes, but what I'm getting at is that what I learned in school was that it was known that the Spanish were down in the South, but it was predominantly the quote unquote the British up in the North, and it just
Yeah,
isn't the case, is what I'm getting at.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
still cheesed off because I was never taught, never, and it was never mentioned that the Spanish fought on the side of the uh, Americans in the War for Independence. I was never taught that. I didn't know that. I learned that from you and started doing my own research on it this year. I'm 61 years old. How am I just hearing about this? And I would ask anybody else out here, any other American out here, if they had ever heard that there were Spanish people, and I'm talking about the nation of Spain fighting on the side of the revolutionaries in the Revolutionary War, fighting against the British. I didn't know that. And I think that that is something that needs to be fixed.
if you were born and raised in Louisiana, you'd have a better chance at knowing that, um, and I would have had a better chance of knowing that. But
I,
since I
I
wasn't,
imagine.
because it's Louisiana history,
Yeah, it's more
because
regional. Yeah.
Louisiana was incorporated into the United States through the Louisiana Purchase,
Right.
not because it was originally, before that it was the French and then the Spanish,
Hmm.
and then the French again.
Yeah, I know it went back and forth a couple of times, didn't it?
The French, due to wars in Europe and the loss of different possessions, the French then gave Louisiana to the King of Spain, and the King of Spain didn't want it. He was like,
Hmm.
"Give me," because the problem is that Spain had X amount of land they
Hmm.
already had to deal with.
Yeah.
So North America wasn't necessarily it. You didn't have enough people to populate so much territory in order to keep it secure for your nation.
Yeah.
You know,
So get rid of the liability.
get rid of as much liability as you could, but they kept it and they
Mhm.
defended it. And then when they saw that the United States or the colonies were looking for independence from the British, which they were, the English and the Spanish at that time
Mhm.
were not on friendly, terms, and neither were the French and the British. But then
Mhm.
again, the French and the Spanish, later, were not on friendly terms.
Yeah.
It all, they fought each other depending on the politics of the day. But during the
Right.
American Revolution, the French and the Spanish were allies,
Mhm.
and they helped the colonies because they wanted
Right.
to stick it to England in
And
that time.
and that's what I'm cheesed off about because we're taught about the French, but I was never taught about the Spanish. I'd never heard that. And when you brought it up, I was like, "What? Are you kidding me? I've never heard
Yeah.
of this." And then I started doing further research on my own, and sure enough, and it's like, well, why was that just totally omitted? It was not mentioned in any of the textbooks I read, anything, you know.
And there's also one other thing just to mention, that a person, or I'm sorry, yeah, a person in the British Navy
Mhm.
or British Army or whatever in those years, generally speaking, were English and whatnot, and this, but there were many that weren't.
Right.
But they were British under that banner, and they were from Spain and other places. You
Oh
could
yeah.
have people that were generationally in England,
Yeah.
which we've also looked at in some of my previous
Well,
videos.
they were also from Scotland, Ireland, Wales. They were from the Scandinavian countries. They were German. I mean,
So
there
you would
were.
have ethnicities or people from different regions under
Mhm,
the banner of and likewise Spain.
mhm,
So it wasn't, so the cartoon is, you know, color wars. In other words, red flag, black flag, blue flag, and then
mhm.
all the people from the red flag are one group of people, and it's not like that.
Yeah.
Although it's mostly like that,
Mhm.
because they're coming from a
Well,
particular. But no,
yes,
let me say this one bit. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
well, I was going to say yes because we were fighting for independence from the British, from Great Britain, from the king, from the crown. So anybody who wore that uniform was quote unquote the British,
Yeah,
regardless of whether they were born in London or Madrid.
right, right.
So,
Exactly. And on the flip side of that, for the Spanish, many of their generals and many of their captains
mhm,
were literally Irish.
yeah.
The governors of Cuba, for whatever spell they were, and other territories, were simply Irish people that fled due to persecution by the English. The Spanish accepted them because they shared a common religion,
Mhm,
and they allowed them to participate, and they grew up in that world, in the Spanish world. So you would have people called, Diego O'Donnell,
yeah.
because simply put, an Irishman married a Spanish woman, and
Mhm,
generationally, and then you'd have successive generations of people with Irish names, um, in a Spanish setting, and that happened in Cuba, uh, to a good extent, so that you have people with different types of, and it happened with the French too and stuff. So there's a lot of
right.
churning of societies and cultures back
Mhm.
then.
And again,
Yeah.
there goes that mixture all over the place because
Yeah.
people are people and they're going to get with who they like,
Well, yeah. Throughout
regardless.
history. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's too much of a thing to hold back from people.
Jim Dockrell says the Brits love Spain now, at least during their holidays. Yes. If
Yeah.
they can get down to the pool early enough to put a towel on the lounge chair. So,
Yeah.
Greg asked one. I don't know if he's yanking your leg, my leg, or anybody's leg because I was talking about the 1,000 years of history. And what bearing does DNA and lineage from 1,000 years ago have on your present person? It's an interest. It's no different than if I was tinkering with cars. It's an interest. I have an interest in history, and I have a specific interest in personal history. People go their entire lives without even thinking or caring about this kind of thing, and that's great for them. It's an interest on my part.
Well, yeah. It's so look. Um, if I believe it's a sincere point of view from Greg. So,
Hmm.
um, which I'm going to assume, according to what he wrote,
Hmm.
that he doesn't regard it much,
Hmm.
according to what he wrote. Because if you would see the value in it,
Well,
then you would write something different. Now, let me lay out my thought on this. According to what he wrote, it sounds like a bit not standoffish, but a bit like, nah, but what's the point? Um, there, there, all you have to point to is different strokes for different folks.
yeah.
There's libraries
Hmm.
across this country, because libraries were invented in the United States of America, and then we spread
Yeah,
them.
right.
Um, we invented the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah.
But there's
That
places,
was in Virginia, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Um, so these libraries contain books on every subject. I remember going to the library and browsing the library. looking for subjects that were curious to me, and I would pick out a book and just read it because I wanted to see what was in there. It was
Mhm.
an exploration.
Yeah.
Some people dig whatever the hell they dig. And so what value is it now? What was the thing he said?
What what bearing does DNA and lineage from 1,000 years ago have on your present person? Well, in purely scientific terms, everything, because without that DNA and lineage, there is no present person.
and 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 on a historical in a historical sense, what it's doing is it's helping people that are interested in things such as that see the trace the movements of people
Mhm.
that before were inaccessible to historians and people that enjoy that sort of thing, and scholars. It's laying out the evidence, the clues that are left in DNA along with archaeology of
Mhm.
how actually movements of people, according to the objects and bones that were left across, the
Mhm.
world, giving them context, extra context for those very things that happened in history
Yep.
that we talk about to this day. If somebody talks to you about the Romans, fighting the Germanic people and the fall of Rome, and people talk about all these things. It's because there's documentation on it, and there's also archaeology on it, and now there's DNA on it, and
Mhm.
and and there's surprises along the way. You have to be interested in it. So, what bearing? It clarifies history, and in the case of like the Hitler thing, it also shows the ironies of people's beliefs across time that if looked at today, you could see it. You could it look DNA also. Last thing I'll say, DNA also, due to what it is, what it's showing, it also dispels issues of bias. Um, Let me correct that. It also dispels the validity of issues of bias when it comes to, oh, those people are from India, or those people are Chinese, or this person. Yes, those people are from India, those people are Chinese, but it dispels the idea that you're something special. You are something special if you think in terms of religion and you are an individual, but in terms of like some sort of genetic thing that makes you, you know, like, oh, my group of people, okay, so like my folks were cute. You know what? We're the best. I believe that we're the best. Like I believe that my people were the best. Spain
Sure you should.
is badass, but my cutoff line is this. I understand, I believe that because I'm interested in that study of my history, but in
Mhm.
reality, I understand that we're all freaking human beings. So I don't think we're the best in that turn, in that sense. It corrects if you're willing to open your mind to it, which a lot of people out there may be late to the game or never to the game, but it does help in that if people understood that that race is sort of like a fluid thing that people culturally, it really is, maybe it could dispel all these Antifa slash BML slash all these people. It won't, because people want their
Well,
resources,
yes, they want to separate themselves into their tribes.
right?
Yeah.
But intellectually, there's no, the validity of such things is not as solid as previously. So it has value in that level. But whatever. The point is, whatever you're into,
Yeah.
it holds bearing because it's what you're freaking into.
Okay. Greg says, does it give a predisposed direction to a person's character or disposition? I
Yes.
I don't know. I've not studied that. I really can't say yes, no, or maybe. And that I think there are too many variables in
Yes.
that. In that, if you want to learn about that kind of thing, all you have to do is look for a similar group of people in a different country that weren't exposed to the same environments. And there are all kinds of, I mean, there are people, this is a field of study. This question that you're asking, Greg, is a separate field of study. And there are people who are, I mean, have more degrees than a thermometer who are studying this very question right now. And some will say, yes, definitely. Others say, no, it's hogwash. Others will say, I don't know. We're still looking,
Okay,
you know.
so can you put it back up so I can?
Sure,
'Cause
sure.
I'd really
Sorry.
like to share this
I was
concept.
trying to get it. It was covering half of your face, and I was trying to, you know.
No, I just want to add this to it. You know, so he says, but does it give a predisposed? Now, I don't know what fits in the place of it, but I'm assuming that he means DNA.
The 1,000 years of DNA lineage.
Okay,
What bearing does it have on your present person? But does
okay,
it give a predispose?
okay. So, in terms of pure DNA, um, you get handed genes from your folks that are recombined in your body. Um, so you are dealt a set of cards genetically.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. And some of those cards you're dealt predispose you for certain, and the key word is predispose you for certain things such as height,
Right.
the way your look, your ability to hear, the color of your hair, the amount of, and here's a tough one, the propensity for intelligence,
Well,
the propensity for cognitive ability, the propensity for you to have one disease or another. So are we predisposed? We're predisposed with the cards we're dealt, but predisposed is a maybe yes, maybe no.
but
This combination of letters at this spot in your DNA has been shown to cause X, whatever
wait,
X might be. It doesn't mean that you're going to get X, but it predisposes you compared to someone that doesn't have that in the gene, according to whatever degree of study. Is it a small sample study? Is it a highly reliable study? Is it? And so even at highly reliable, there are people that can escape that X consequence to that. But are we predisposed? We are predisposed at a certain level according to the genes that we're given.
okay, but he's talking specifically about a person's character or disposition. Those are personality traits, not physical traits.
We are predisposed to have certain. Okay, so we're predisposed to have character. Look, we're a combination of all the things. There's a level of predisposed due to genetics. There's a level of ambient environmental factors. There's there's, and then there's a level. There's many levels, and then there's a level of just because you are strong, pig-headed, and want to go one way or the other with your personality. There's a It's a bunch of things interacting um, together. That's a difficult calculation, but
Right.
there are predispositions for all sorts of things.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. That is a separate study. There are people who are, I mean, very, very learned people who are studying whether that there is a DNA connection or a genetic connection with personality, character, or just your disposition. I mean, obviously, like you just said, there are a ton of variables in there because your environment, your upbringing, your religious beliefs. I mean, there are a
Yeah.
ton of variables
It's
involved in all that.
complicated.
It is, it's very complex.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say they're still studying it. Some folks will say yes, other folks will say no. Most of the researchers involved in that field are saying, we just don't know yet. We don't know yet. That's why we're still looking.
It depends on what specific character is made up. So, like I think you said character, or
Yes,
personality and such.
character and disposition.
So character and disposition are comprised of It's not just one attribute.
Mhm.
A character is can be chopped up into a multitude of small little
Right.
um, personality. Um, um, I don't even know.
It,
The
it
character
could
is a broad umbrella.
it could also be learned.
No, no, but wait. Time out because what I want. So aspects of okay, character encompasses many things.
Right.
Character is not one thing,
Right.
and because character is not one thing, we would have to say the specific thing and then say, is this part of character being studied, and what are the studies? And so characters is a broad word that umbrellas a lot of behaviors that people
Right.
are involved in. So a character,
And
it's a difficult it's difficult.
and that's
I
why
think
I'm saying it can be taught. The difference between right and wrong is instilled at you in it from a young age. And it's learned over time. Well, that's part of your character. That's a trait of your
that
character,
is a trait. Yes.
and there are many, many, many different traits. And
Yes.
that's what is being studied is there a genetic connection with certain character traits? And a lot of people say yes, a lot of people say no. Most researchers in the field say we just don't know yet.
No, no, there's a propensity.
Yes, there's a
Here's
propensity,
the
but
problem with all this. Here's the let me clear this up because I mean, I have looked at it a little bit, and
mhm,
by a little bit I mean a little bit, but I mean that I have looked at. So
okay,
people are studying different things all the time in labs across the world.
right,
um there's the field of psychology, because this falls into psychology of people's behaviors and stuff. Does psychology match DNA? Do genes match up with what psychologists have defined as character behaviors, such as conscientiousness,
mhm,
as an example? um, a bunch of different character things. They're trying to figure those things out,
right,
but whatever we have going on in us in these cells, it's very vast and very complicated. So people pick out little things to focus on and see if there's a percentage of the population that, let's say, people that like to massacre, other people. Let's test all these
those
people.
Mongols,
Let's test all these people out that have a propensity for psychopathy, that lack certain sensibilities towards others,
mhm,
and stuff. Let's study 100 people. Let's study 2,000 people. Let's study 10,000 people. Let's study. They've done studies of hundreds of thousands of people,
mhm,
in different categories, and then they say all these people that we've studied under this study, we have found that X amount that carry these two genes together show the similar trait, and the people that don't show that behavior. And therefore, according to this study, and here's the trick: if the study involves a lot of people, and we're considering that this is an official study where people are actually doing all the rights and they're publishing all the information so other people
right,
can critique it, like a published official paper.
right,
If the study has a large volume of people that they've sampled and they've come to a certain conclusion, that conclusion is evidence towards one direction or the other.
right,
It could be, it could be that regardless of the conclusion, there could be a person out there that has those two things and not show any of those traits.
oh,
There's
exactly,
always a way out,
mhm.
because human beings are more than just two genes.
Right. There are outliers all over the place in every direction.
Yeah, and we're too complicated, but they're giving us
Right,
a barometer
right,
of what they find. That's
right.
that's basically what's happening, a
Yeah.
barometer of what they find.
Yes. And And again, they are still studying all of that because some of these studies have not been peer reviewed. Some of them have been peer reviewed to death, so much that the paper's worn out.
And many
But
of them are free.
and
You can
it's
I've read
and
them.
it's ongoing. But one study does not. It when there are
Yes,
when there
it
are 30
depends.
when there are 30 studies out there ongoing, putting calling one study the definitive work is a mistake, in my opinion, because there are still so many other studies ongoing.
Yeah,
You know,
it depends, Mark,
there are a
because
lot of variables.
it depends, Mark, because the key is that yes, it needs to be um, scrutinized by others.
Hmm.
But studies, and by the way, we're talking broadly, but there's
Yes, we
studies that we
are.
can go right now and read specifically and see what that
Sure.
entails. There are studies that gather over 300,000 people for a
Right.
specific trade or whatnot, and then they assess it, and it's complicated. Like I don't, but you can read it and you can have
Yeah.
a novice idea over. Um, uh, a study that does that many people is coming to a conclusion. And although you could go against that conclusion, you could also be, oh, well, maybe. But what they're studying could be anything as simple as, well, not simple, but whatever they're studying, the sample size is very important, you
Well, the
know?
sample size is important, yes, but so are methods. I mean, there are a whole bunch of different variables involved in how the study is done, and that's why there's
Yeah.
a peer review.
Yeah.
A peer review is saying, okay, you studied 300,000 people. Were they
Hmm.
all in one region in Europe? What about these people over here that have the same haplogroup? They're in the same haplogroup. Or what about this environmental concern? If we remove this, who was your control group? I mean, so that's what a peer review is studying how that study was done
Hmm.
and compare and taking that result that you're talking about and saying, okay, that's evidence. Meanwhile, we have these other 5 studies going on, and now we got to peer review these.
Hmm.
So, it's an ongoing thing, and that's how science progresses,
Yeah.
and that's how we gain knowledge.
Yeah.
We gain more knowledge. I mean, there are a lot of big breakthroughs. There are a lot of huge breakthroughs, but the sum total of our knowledge is more influenced by a few people here and a few people there who take the time to dig in and research one little thing and bring that information to light. The big, huge reviews and the big, huge studies are great, but it takes one guy to say, well, let's look at it from this direction and see where we go from there.
Yeah. Can I,
You know,
let me just, you're talking in broad
I am
strokes.
talking in very broad strokes.
So at the end of the day, when you do that, you're just giving a lay of the land
Mhm.
on the situation. Um,
Right.
but
But
a specific study, um, we can't. So a specific study takes a lot of work from
mhm,
people focused on that study,
right,
and in order to like let's say if you say, why do people get black hair instead of blonde hair,
right,
and that's a, well, that's a far gone conclusion at this point. They've done the studies.
right.
Like it's a matter of gene pairings,
Mhm.
eye color likewise. I mean,
Right.
there's things that are but one could tomorrow come up with something, and like we found other genes involved in this that
Right.
also attribute to it. So it is an ongoing thing.
And that's why they're still studying it, because
And
you're 100% right.
there's always more to be. But as far as where we're at now, you know, people that do this sort of thing publish publicly the
Mhm.
information. So
Yeah.
we could go right now and whatever study and look at it specifically. But as
Right.
far as a broad thing, yes, people get all sorts of things wrong, some things right sometimes,
Right.
and this and that. But that's just talking broadly. You know, if
Right.
we look at one specific thing and we get into a specific thing, there's more to discover on that subject.
Sure.
But talking about it broadly speaking, at that level, there's enough there for one not to, you know, if one is sincere, for one not to dismiss the whole
Well,
world of
well,
DNA,
but
you know, because of some predisposed, you know,
but
personal bias, you know.
I don't think anybody's really dismissing it. It's just that this is one satchel of evidence. It's very important evidence. But
Of what? Evidence of what?
uh, well, we're talking about that one particular study. I'm using that one particular study
A study
as of the propensity towards the character traits and things like that we were just talking
but that's
about.
not one
Okay.
study.
Well, let me finish. That
Okay.
is one satchel of evidence, but that's not the whole story yet because it's still being explored.
Yeah.
These other studies may 100% confirm exactly what that satchel of evidence is saying. So you have more evidence coming in that bolsters the case. And that's how science works. That's how it's moved forward. It's not 1 or 10 or 15 studies. It's more and more and more and more
Yeah.
and more.
What I would say is this.
So
What I would say is this for anyone interested in delving in because they find it curious. If you find curious about eye color, what are the studies they've done easily accessible in using Google to the actual thing, to the actual papers? They're complicated. I read them, but they're
pretty
complicated.
dry.
And then what I do is I take pieces and then I look up what those things mean. If I'm so interested in the subject, I'll slice pieces up and put it in Google to search what that means and sort of get an idea. Because
Mhm.
I'm not an educated, formally educated person in anything.
Mhm.
But whatever, I'm curious. So, but with the eye, if you study that, research that, you'll see the whole volume of. You'll never be done with it.
Oh yeah, because they've been studying just eye color. They have been studying that in heredity
Yeah.
For a couple of 100 years.
Yeah, they figured it out already. By the way,
Yeah,
They figured it out.
but
Eye color. They figured out skin color. I'll just tell you straight up. They figured out. Far gone conclusion. You can find it and see hair color, eye color, skin color, height. They've figured it out. Figured it out.
yeah, they've
The
isolated
the
those
genes
genes.
that cause those things. Figured
Yes,
it out. They're figured out.
yeah,
Cholesterol levels, By the way, these are propensities.
right,
With the eye color, it's not propensities. If you have a combination, you're going to get
right,
brown
exactly.
eyes.
And that's what I mean. They have found those genes.
It's out. The studies are out there.
Yes,
But in doing that, they're specifically focused on those. Look, long story short, not to keep going. Um, there is value in all this. People that are interested can look at it, and people that aren't can't. But when or don't have to. But when you talk about things in the course of a lifetime with other people, and something has already been figured out, um, you know, just speaking in terms of um, something to like the eye color thing, you know, and
mhm,
somebody says, oh, if you look at the moon in a full moon, your child will end up with green eyes or something like that, or and they still hold on to these myths. They're quite allowed to believe such things, but there's extra evidence as well. There's information that could inform a person, and people choose to or disregard as they go along. And what else? What else do we have? We have to accept the world, the people in the world that we live in, how they deal with information. I mean, you know, it's a
yeah,
curiosity. I'm a novice. I find it curious, but I still believe that we have that we're a gift from the Creator, from God. Even though there's all this science stuff that people fear, but
yeah. But
I don't see any contention between a spiritual situation and a scientific. I don't see any problem with none of it.
Yeah,
You
me
know,
either. I don't see it as a competition.
you know.
So, okay. Yeah. Jim Dockrell says it's all dependent on which chip Bill Gates had you injected with. Yeah. Well, we went all over the place. Do you want to wrap it up, or do you want to keep going, or what do you want to do?
Uh, uh, However you want. I can land the plane just as well as fly a little. Um,
I'm just wondering where we go from here because we kind of, you know,
no, you know what? How about this? I'll just say this: are we worried? And this is a general question, but
okay.
maybe you have, your your personal leaning. Um, are we worried? And I think you have brought up this question in the past, but
Mhm.
whatever. I think in the context of what we're talking about right now,
Okay.
are we worried, or are you worried that technology? This is very broad, but is going to get out of hand. And um, how you have said something similar to, you have questioned something similar to this, but like we're talking about this right now.
Mhm.
Me as a layperson, again, I've repeated it just in case but I can read and I can put one sentence after the other, and I
Sure.
can read the conclusions that people make, in a study or that. So I can do that at least,
Mhm.
um, you know, um, so that's something, but I'm not a scientist or anything like that.
Right.
I'm a layperson. But could it get to the point where science or technologies, it becomes dystopic, where we're enslaved due to certain advances that are used, um,
Well,
to dehumanize us or
some
to
would
corral us?
some would say that's already happened, but I've heard those arguments since, I mean, my entire life. That where
Yeah,
first we were slaves to the television. That this is in my lifetime. I don't know what
yeah,
was talked about before that,
yeah. I
but
remember.
within my lifetime, I can remember it being said we were slaves to the television. Then we were slaves to the mass media at large, which included radio, TV, movies, magazines, and newspapers. We're slaves to that. And then we became slaves to the computer as that technology. Then we were slaves to our televisions again when the video revolution came out, when VHS and beta. And then we were slaves to the computer when computers became affordable and everybody had one in their house. Now we're slaves to the telephone. I think that as the technology progresses, something I've noticed over the years is as technology progresses and the new best thing comes along, the goalpost keeps getting moved further and further back.
Which goes
So,
would in reference to.
in reference to the conclusion that we are slaves to technology and we have dehumanized ourselves, some will say that that already happened,
Mhm.
that that has already taken place. Others will say, no, it's not taken place. We still have free will. We still have free choice. And they move that goalpost down the road to say, no, we're not, the technology is not the master of us. We are still the masters of the technology. So I don't think anybody can predict the future. Um, I think that we are messing around with, I say messing around, we are using up resources that do have a limited quantity. So there may come a time where all this technology we have is just obsolete because we're out of certain elements or minerals. So will it ever get to the point to where we're all microchipped at birth and we're taught a given a 4-year degree after a year of study? I can't say yes, no, or maybe, but will people allow that? I mean, the average person, the populace at large, a certain percentage will, but I think a greater percentage won't, because at the end of the day we are individuals, and I think history has proven over and over again that that is something a certain sector of the population will constantly and consistently fight for as long as they are able. If they're no longer able, that's a different story. But as long as they are able, they will continue to resist that kind of a totalitarian existence.
Okay, so can you give me a recent example of where people put a stop to something um, outrageous? And if you can't, and
In what?
let me say this to give you this other option. And
Okay.
if you can't, what is the earliest date going back in time that you can find that example?
Well, it's nothing huge. We're not talking about a revolution or overthrowing a government or anything like that. But history has shown that when the public can no longer defend itself from, for instance, a totalitarian regime, they're choiceless when that takes over. History has proven that over and over and over again. You know, your existence is a direct result of that. So we have that to look at, and that's still fresh in too many memories. So if technology is used in that direction, I think people will reject it. Enough people will reject it
So,
that it would be hard pressed. You know, they would be hard pressed to make it succeed.
all right. So,
Now, again, we're talking about technology.
okay, in
So,
the spheres of technology,
mhm,
but I'll I'll say that this is. Do you remember? And I don't know if it was true in the 70s and 60s. You'll tell me.
okay.
Um, I would assume that you're going to agree with me on the 80s, but you may not. I think that it's safe to bet that you would agree, but let's see. In the 80s,
Hmm.
a lot of the iconic movies
Hmm.
that were being put out were movies where, in terms of America, let's say, or the United States,
Okay.
where kids fought it out and broke free from tyrannies and stuff, whether it was an invasion from some sort of country, Red Dawn.
Red Dawn, yeah.
There
I
was
was
all
trying to
these
think of
sort
the
of
name.
like let
Hmm.
us fight these powers that are encroaching and such and this and that.
Hmm.
I have not seen any of those. That was an 80s world theme,
Hmm.
or 80s era theme.
Well, that was a Cold War theme, yeah.
But afterwards,
Hmm.
there's nothing. Everything is like flowers and lilies and flowers and
Yeah,
hookah kuka kamuka
yeah.
pakawa.
Well, because we no longer have the Cold War. All of that was a metaphor for a Soviet invasion of the US.
Mhm.
Every science fiction movie that had aliens invading us
Yeah,
was a metaphor for the Cold War.
yeah.
Swap out the Soviet Union for the Martians, and that's what it was about.
Darth Vader was like a Nazi.
Darth Vader was the no, he was the secretary of the general secretary of the Communist Party. But that's what they were. It was a metaphor for a Soviet invasion,
Yeah,
and
and but
some of it, some of it, the was so thin you could see through it like used Neutrogena soap. You know what I mean? It was just like, well, that wasn't very veiled at all, man. I mean, come on.
but you know that influenced. So you saw that you were a
Hmm.
little bit older, but as
Well, but
kids we ate it up like it
yeah,
was
but
freaking Jello.
but the thing is, I didn't make that connection until the collapse of the Soviet Union, and I started because I was living that life right there.
Hmm.
I started making the connections, and then started reading reviews and things like that. And sure enough, it all came. Yeah, hell yeah, all of that was a metaphor for a Soviet invasion. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the '90s, you're absolutely right. Those movies went away.
Yeah,
They just went away. There was still good versus evil in the movies, but there was not really one main character, one main villain, you know. You'd have to, Star Wars would have to be the outlier because it was started during the Cold War
Yeah.
and the franchise carried through. But even number 6 came out before the collapse of the Soviet Union. So it was still there.
Who's our who? There is no other side enemy displayed in that fashion anymore.
And in mass media, in the culture, popular culture,
It's
no,
the
there
American
isn't.
public.
No, in the in not in the popular culture now. Um, but again, the Marvel franchise, you did have one main villain, but it was so outlandish and otherworldly.
Yeah.
They weren't. It wasn't just lift up the suit of armor and there's a Soviet uniform. You really would have to make a gigantic leap
Attach.
to try to attach any nation to Thanos.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, difficult.
you would
It is.
really, you would really have to try hard
Yeah, it wasn't
to
as overt like what we saw back in the day.
exactly. I mean, the leaders of of these mythical Martian civilizations. You were looking at Stalin, or you were looking at Lenin, or you were looking at Khrushchev. Some of them looked more like Lenin than Lenin himself. A caricature of him
Yeah.
to be sure. I mean, go back to Flash Gordon, and that was in the 30s. Look at Flash Gordon. Look at the main villain was Ming the Merciless. Look at Ming the Merciless and look at Vladimir Lenin. I mean, you would swear they were brothers. That's not a very veiled metaphor,
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty in your face.
All
So,
right.
I mean,
Well,
you know,
Harju joined us,
hey, what's going
or
on, Dan?
or at least I just saw his.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, Harju. We've just been talking a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and
Of course, many of us will be meat slaves to the machine mind, glad I'll be dead. You think so? You're assuming they're not just going to put your brain in a jar and you'll be a part of the consciousness, the big electron. Whoa.
they'll
You know,
put your brain in a jar, Harju, and they'll take
I
some
mean,
wiring, and they'll connect it to a lathe, and
mm-hmm.
they'll hardwire you into the electricity grid of your shop.
That's it.
So with your brain in a vat inside your shop, you will still be able to operate all the
Yeah, you'll be
machinery.
cranking out the bedposts. That's right. They're gonna put him on bedpost duty. I mean, didn't you watch Futurama? That was a documentary. You know that, right?
You'll be like, another bed must be built, another bed must be built.
The right people will get that reference, Dan. Abby something. Oh man. Well, there's one of the right people. Did you ever see the Mel Brooks movie Young Frankenstein?
You know what? I saw pieces of it, but I never sat through it.
Funny flick. It's a classic. It's one of the funniest movies ever made, and that's a reference to that movie. We need to land the plane. We started off with Hitler and ended with Mel Brooks. We got to land the plane.
All right. All right, guys. So that's what this was. And we'll catch you guys next week here at the Trampled Underfoot podcast show on YouTube. And we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time. You can catch our past episodes on our website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. Press that Wayback Machine button, and you can download our previous audio files so you can enjoy those on your drive to work or however you wish,
or the drive home.
Or the drive home. And we also have a Facebook page, same name. You could drop us a line and say, hey, why don't you talk about this or that? And we might consider that. We're always open to different show ideas. We're also sponsored by
Harneal Media. I see we have both halves of the Harneal Media crew in here this evening. And I wanted to say thank you to both. They sponsor Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com. That's our website. If you're looking to start or increase your web presence, look no further than Harneal Media. You will get personalized service. You will get a real live human being to interact with, be it via email, telephone, snail mail, smoke signals, however you want to do it. Check them out at harnealmedia.com. That's HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com.
All right. So enjoy the rest of, be safe and enjoy yourselves however it is that you enjoy yourselves. And nothing. We'll catch you next time. Take it easy.
See you. Peace.